Welcome to the Mac's Future Weekly Podcast. All Apple talk and no chit-chat.
Okay, welcome to episode 122 of the Apple Podcast. This is Lex at Mac'sFuture.com. Today is July 17th, 2012. And this is a chit-chat-free podcast all about Apple. So let's get to it, and you can support it by giving it a positive review in the iTunes stores. Thanks for listening. Okay, so the first story we should talk about today is a report from the Wall Street Journal, which is a very reliable source about what goes on in the Apple universe regarding the next iPhone. And the story by Juro Osawa and Lorraine Luck says, and I guess this comes out of Hong Kong, where maybe Wall Street Journal has connections with Chinese manufacturers who do stuff for Apple. But basically it says that the next generation iPhone, the iPhone 5, is currently being manufactured by Asian component makers, and it's going to use a new technology that makes the smartphone screen thinner. It says here, people familiar with the matter. And specifically, it says here, Japanese liquid crystal display maker Sharp and Japan Display Inc., a new company that combined three Japanese electronic makers' display units, as well as some LG Display from South Korea, are currently mass-producing panels for the next iPhone using so-called in-cell technology. So what makes the iPhone particularly thin is a new type of display that's called in-cell technology, and we had heard about this before. And it says here the technology integrates touch sensors into the LCD itself, making it unnecessary to have a separate touchscreen layer. That's what the story says. And the story basically says the absence of a layer, which is usually about 0.5 millimeter thick, makes the whole screen thinner, and it improves the quality of the display also. And now it says that the current iPhone 4S has a display. The current iPhone 4S is 9.3 millimeters thick. So, I mean, I do think it makes sense for Apple to try to make thinner and thinner iPhones. That's what makes it, look more attractive. But also, apparently, it's going to help with the manufacturing of smartphones, because apparently, having an all-in-one display makes it easier to manufacture because you don't have to glue or combine two things together. So it says here, the people familiar with the situation said that the LCD makers are finding the manufacturing process challenging and time-consuming as they scramble to achieve high yield rates. It also says here that this thinner device could make extra room available for other components such as batteries. So it should be interesting. I mean, I do think it makes sense to make thinner devices and improve the display. I mean, imagine what all this display technology is going to do in the long run. We're going to have, it's not only going to be for phones, but it's going to be for things like tablets, right? Thin displays. And thin and beautiful and powerful displays are just going to increase as more research goes into it. Who knows, maybe one day we'll have like a sheet of paper-sized thin tablet or device, and it'll be bendable. Actually, we've already seen stuff like that in demos, and people have developed it. But you're just going to have electronic tablets and screens that are going to be super thin and bendable. And I think the iPhone 5 that's coming out is just a step in that direction. So I think it's very exciting stuff. So another thing that's going to be new in the iPhone 5, according to Cult of Mac, in an article by Rob Lefebvre on July 16th, are the new SIM cards. Apparently they're going to be even smaller than the micro SIM cards that exist now. They're going to be called Nano-SIM cards. They're going to be really teeny, really tiny. And according to the Cult of Mac's article, carriers are starting to stockpile these small SIM cards in advance of the iPhone 5, which is probably going to be a big seller. It says here, even though Apple hasn't confirmed the iPhone 5, nor whether it will use the mini SIM card it won the design proposal for, many European mobile carriers are placing orders for the tiny little smartphone cards in anticipation of the iPhone 5 launch, which could come out in September or October. And it says here the Nano-SIM cards aren't even on the market. But Apple's proposal to use the technology won over Nokia's proposal, and now it's going to be the industry standard. So it's a big win for Apple. It says here that Financial Times reports that, quote, sources with knowledge of the situation, end quote, expect the iPhone 5 to have a slimmer hardware design. We know that from the other story, which would make a SIM card like this necessary. And it says here the carriers, of course, don't want to get caught not having these SIM cards in stock. And Cult of Mac points out it'll be funny if Apple uses the current micro SIM card in the iPhone 5, and all these other carriers would get stuck with the micro SIM card that they think Apple's going to release but never did. So that's one of the perils of a lot of companies that rely on Apple's iPhone product. I mean, it's case makers, it's companies that use the dock connector, and also carriers, because carriers want to carry the next iPhone. But Apple is very secretive. It doesn't want, to leak out the big news. So a lot of companies that, make stuff that work with the iPhone, like carriers, like accessory makers, like case makers, they don't know what the design is going to exactly look like. So one of the perils of working in the Apple world. Now, another sign that the iPhone 5 is getting closer to launch is that Apple released another beta version of iOS 6, which is the operating system that's probably going to debut with the launch of the iPhone 5. So last night, July 16th, Apple released Beta 3, the third beta for the iOS 6, which works on the iPhone, the iPad, and iPod Touch. I downloaded it, and others did too who have developer accounts. And, there's not a lot that people have figured out that's in it. One thing, it said in the update that it fixed bug fixes and improvements. And, one thing I noticed, though, that the podcaster app that I have, not Apple's, but a third-party podcaster app, doesn't work. And it did work under, beta version 2 and beta version 1. So now I'm using Apple's podcast app to listen to podcasts. So, it's progress. We're getting there. Okay, so one of the things that people have discovered or have a clue about in the third beta of iOS 6 is that there might be a charge for having FaceTime go over cellular connection, at least with AT&T. Now, previously, when iOS 6 beta was released, people reported that iOS 6 is going to allow people to make FaceTime calls over cellular data connections, not just Wi-Fi, which I think is very important for making FaceTime used more widely. Already, various apps allow video conferencing over a cell phone data connection. I think the Skype app does that, for example. But FaceTime did not, so you needed to either jailbreak your iPhone or use a Wi-Fi connection. Well, with this third beta, 9to5mac.com and other sites have reported that there's a clue that maybe AT&T is going to charge for it, because when I guess they were able to get like this window to pop up when they used FaceTime over cell phone connection. Now, so they got the screen that says FaceTime over cellular. To enable FaceTime over cellular on this account, contact AT&T at 611 or visit www.att.com, my wireless, call or go to website. So there's a fear that AT&T maybe when iOS 6 is launched is going to start charging extra to allow FaceTime over cell phone data connection. So this is kind of troublesome So now when I made a cell phone call over FaceTime, and let's see what happens again. I'm going to put it on, and it's waiting for activation, and I'm going to see if I get the same sort of error message. And nothing's happening right now. I guess it's trying to connect. No, I didn't get that window, so I don't know how they did that. I don't know if it's just a glitch that just occurred in some people's cell data connection. Use cell data on. Let's see if I put that on. Well, it's weird. I don't know how they did this. So 9to5Mac claims that they get this window that pops up in the third beta. I have the third beta. I don't see that window popping up. But I think it would really suck if AT&T charged extra. I mean, the reality is, even if you have an unlimited data plan with AT&T on the iPhone, it's not unlimited, because AT&T pretty much has said that they're going to throttle you terribly and slow down your connection to the point that it's unusable if you go over 3 gigabytes of data per month. So, if you're using data with a FaceTime call, that's coming out of your limited plan. There is no unlimited plan. I know AT&T claims that people like me are grandfathered into their unlimited data plan, but we're not, because AT&T has made it a practice to throttle you once you hit a certain threshold. So given that you have a limited amount of data, I really think it's terrible of AT&T to charge extra. For example, AT&T doesn't allow, for example, turning your iPad into a Wi-Fi hotspot. And Verizon allows you to do it for free if you've got a data plan on your Verizon LTE iPad. And I just think, look, if AT&T keeps this up, nickel and diming users, I'm going to switch. I'm going to switch to Verizon for the next iPhone if it's LTE. So, it's a pretty serious development. I really hope AT&T doesn't do this. And maybe Apple will talk to AT&T and tell them that, they don't want that to happen, because then it really dilutes the value of FaceTime. I mean, Apple's trying to make FaceTime be a kind of standard, and by charging extra for it, it's not really making a standard. Now, what would be interesting? Right now, FaceTime doesn't... You can't make voice over IP calls to landline with FaceTime. You can just make a video data voice over IP call to somebody else with FaceTime. What if Apple allowed you to make plain old voice over IP calls with FaceTime? I guess why would you do that? Because maybe then they could make a deal that if you paid for that service, they'll split a fee with AT&T. I don't know, just a thought. Now, something else new was reported in iOS 6 Beta 3. MacRumors.com, in a story on July 17th, today, reported that there's one little subtle change, and when iOS 6 was announced, it was announced that certain features didn't work on older phones. In particular, shared photo streams and VIP mail did not work with the iPhone 3GS. Well, in Beta 3, it looks like that restriction is no longer there, and that at least these features will be working on the iPhone 3GS, which is important because the iPhone 3GS is still selling, and it's a very cheap phone. When you sign up with a new plan, it's sort of like the cheapest iPhone that's being sold. So that's good news for people who want to buy the 3GS, and also people who have a 3GS and want to just keep using it with iOS 6. And I wonder if there's other little tweaks like that in iOS 6 beta that haven't been found. Now, in terms of how Apple and the iPhone are doing in the mobile marketplace, Simco.com, which is a great website for sort of analyzing how Apple's doing as a company, run by a guy named Horace Daydew. It has a great post on July 16th entitled From Bad to Worse, From Good to Great. And basically he's done this like chart regarding the estimated market value of the mobile phone industry. And he's comparing last year to this year. And basically he shows that, look, last year, Apple's iPhone in terms of the marketplace was like the value of the market was like, for the iPhone was about over $200 billion. And, Samsung was about, I don't know, I'd say about 60 billion or so. And then all the others collectively, like a group of companies like RIM, Nokia, HTC, LG, and even little Google, Motorola, they were like, looking at this chart, they were like, I don't know, maybe 70, 80 billion. And since then, in a year, the iPhone has gone to being about a $450 billion value in terms of a market. And Samsung looks like on this chart, I don't know, I'd say about 130 billion. But all the others have shrunk. So Samsung has grown a lot, and Apple has grown a lot. And it shows that the smartphone market is dominated by Apple and Samsung. Now, I'm not sure, how he values the smartphone market in terms of dollars. He says here in his notes, in absolute terms, the iPhone franchise created $245 billion in value, while Samsung created $83 billion. The others destroyed. This is in the 1 year since last year. So I guess he's factoring in like the profitability maybe of the smartphone market. Now, in terms of sheer number of smartphones, I think Android has a bigger marketplace. But I think what Horace Daydew is valuing is the dollar value of the business of the smartphone. Because, maybe there are more Android phones and maybe Samsung selling more. But how much money is it making on it? Apple really gets a premium for the iPhone. And I think that's what Horace Daydew is valuing as the ultimate profitability. So very good post by Horace. Now, in terms of how many iPhone 5s, Apple could be selling when it releases it in the fall, there's an interesting article in CNN Money, Tech Fortune, by Philip Elmer-DeWitt, and he basically is reporting on something an analyst by the name of Gene Munster, who covers Apple, has opined on to his clients. He works for Piper Jaffray, and basically, as reported by Philip Elmer-DeWitt, Piper Jaffray expects that there is definitely going to be at least 80 million iPhone 5 sales, and that they're, quote, in the bag. And basically, what the article says here is that Munster did a cell phone survey, and the key takeaways were that when asked whether they were going to buy the next iPhone 5, 65% said an Apple iPhone they would purchase in terms of the next phone that they buy, 19% an Android phone, 6%, 0.5% not a smartphone. So this is for all cell phone buyers. That's pretty amazing. Only 2.5% said they'd get a research in motion. And it says here that 51% of the respondents who planned on making the iPhone their next smartphone specifically said that they were waiting for the iPhone 5. So that's pretty big metric. It goes on to say that 94.2% of the iPhone users who were contacted, who currently have an iPhone, plan to buy an iPhone for their next phone. And so that's a big metric. And then it goes on to say Android phones were measured at a rebuy rate of 60%, up from 47% last year. But it says that Android is still losing 33% of current users to an iPhone. So, I mean, that's not a good sign. And it says here that 38% of BlackBerry users expect to switch to an iPhone. And then it goes on to say, when asked to put a dollar value on their current phone, iPhone owners averaged $313, which is $100 higher than the device's subsidized price, while Android and BlackBerry phones had value averages of $220 and $219. So apparently Gene Munster said that given the 94% rebuy rate by Apple, people who own the iPhone, and the 51% of all phone owners waiting for the iPhone 5, he estimates that more than half of the projected 170 million iPhone sales for 2013 are quote, in the bag, end quote. So that's a pretty interesting analysis as to how many iPhones are going to be sold. I mean, he thinks that actually there's going to be 170 iPhones sold next year, once the iPhone 5 is launched. Now, one pretty shitty thing that's occurred recently is that some guy in Russia has figured out a way to hack the App Store that Apple has so that people can hack the in-app purchase for apps and sort of steal in-app purchases. So the Russian developer's name is Alexei Borodin, and I guess he's allowing this hack to happen. He wants Cupertino Apple to fix the underlying problem rather than just try to block his inappstore.com service. So I'm reading on Zdnet.com an article by Emil Protolinsky for 0 Day, and it says here, last week Russian developer Alexei Borodin hacked Apple's in-app purchase program for all devices running anything from iOS 3 to iOS 6, allowing these devices to circumvent the payment process and essentially steal in-app content. And it goes on that Apple confirmed the workaround and it said it was investigating the issue. So apparently this guy Borodin has been successful, according to Apple, is getting around Apple's ability to block him. It says first Apple blocked the IP address of the server that Borodin used. Next, Apple issued a takedown request on the hacker's web server and contacted PayPal to prevent users from making donations for keeping this service running. And then Apple served up a copyright claim against the hacker's video. Then Borodin, this Russian guy, switched to a server located in another country. The first was located in Russia, and then he started taking donations via Bitcoin. Bitcoin is that technology that's supposed to be a way to sort of send cash through Bitcoins that no one can track. So this guy Borodin said PayPal sucks because I guess they cut him off. And he uploaded a new video. And so he says he wants Apple to fix the problem by either changing its API or placing new blocks on its servers. And so it's kind of weird because if the guy is trying to actually help get Apple to fix it, why is he taking money to do this sort of thing? As ZDNet points out, it says the worst part of this hack is that iOS developers have no way of protecting their apps. Using store receipts does not work, as Borodin says his service simply needs a single donated receipt, which it can then use to authenticate anyone's purchase requests. It says apparently the technique he used relies on installing certificates for a fake in-app purchase server and a custom DNS server, changing DNS settings to allow the authentication of purchases, and finally emulating the receipt verification server on the Apple App Store. So he's doing some major hacking here. It says here the iOS apps treat Borodin's servers as an official communication because of how Apple authenticates a purchase. And so I don't know, but you have to be careful, as this article points out. It says Cupertino Apple is transmitting its customers Apple's ID and passwords in clear text. The following information is transferred from your device to board and server: app restriction level, app ID, version ID, device guide, in-app purchase quantity, in-app purchase offer name, app identifier, app version, your language, your locale. So basically, you could be giving over significant information to this hacker, so you should be very careful. So, it's interesting. There's always hackers who are trying to hack the App Store, and this is I think it's a pretty bad thing. I mean, they should just make this stuff public. They shouldn't take money for it. Now, a number of Apple executives have retired, and one guy who recently retired is a guy named Bertrand Serlet. And he was the senior vice president at Apple, and he retired, and he was pretty much the head of the Mac OS operating software system for a long time. And he retired, but word comes via All Things Digital that he's now joined the board of directors of Parallels. Now, that's an interesting move, so he's not completely out of retirement. And this is a guy who, was with Steve Jobs when he was at the Next Corporation, and he developed the Next operating system there, which was the basis for Mac OS X. So this guy really knows the Mac operating system, and it's interesting because he's joined the board of Parallels. Now, what's cool about Parallels, it's one of those virtualization software that allow you to run other operating system on the Mac, and Parallels is one of the big programs. It's not too expensive. At most, it's like $70 or $80. A lot of times you can get it on sale for $30 or $40 or less. And if you run Parallels on your Mac, you can then run Windows in it and just run both the Mac and Windows operating system at the same time. So this is pretty cool. And I wonder, is he going to bring any knowledge of the Mac operating system that's going to give Parallels an edge against its competitor, which is, VMware is Parallels' big competitor. So this is an interesting move by a tech giant in a way. This Bertrand Serlet is. Now, one of the big pieces of news that could affect Apple going forward is something that was announced yesterday, which is that Yahoo announced a new CEO for Yahoo, and they announced that Google executive Marissa Mayer is going to be the new CEO, and that was kind of a surprise because Yahoo's had a lot of turmoil, and there was a guy who was sort of a front runner who was running the company as an interim CEO. That's Ross Levinson, and they didn't pick him. They're picking Mayer because, so she's supposed to be product oriented, and she's been with Google for a long time. And the Verge.com, I have a link in the show notes, has a brief history of Marissa Mayer, and this could affect Apple in a number of ways. Apple has some sort of alliance with Yahoo. Like for example, if you go to the iPad app in iOS 6, there's a new Apple clock in there, and the clock is powered by Yahoo. But Yahoo's sort of out there as sort of it was a titan in the tech industry as a destination on the internet back in the 90s, and it's still somewhat relevant, but it's quickly diminishing company. If you go to over at let's go to over at Yahoo. Actually, this is appropriate. We go to their website, and it's sort of like it's a shell of its own company. If you look at the stock chart here, maximum, it's wow. The stock price is at like $15, and at its height in the internet days, it was like over 100. So it's only a fraction of what it used to be worth. As a company, it's only $19 billion in market cap. Apple's over $500 billion in market cap, and Google's way bigger than that. So, it could affect Apple. I mean, Yahoo owns properties like Flickr, which it was a great photo site, but hasn't done much lately. And if Yahoo's turned around, it could be a player. But I gotta tell you, I don't really have a lot of confidence that Marissa Mayer can turn things around, particularly if you read this Verge article about her. And she was the 20th employee at Google. I guess she graduated Stanford in 1999. So she rode up with Google. But according to this article, she never broke the top ceiling there. And, some people, said that she was kind of, she was kind of troublesome within the company. It says here, during the Mayer era, Marissa Mayer, data was king and Google was constantly launching new products fast and hard. Now the company's putting a heavier emphasis on design and narrowing its focus, deprecating marginal products in order to focus on a fewer core offerings, including Google Plus and Search. And it says here, earlier this month, Google announced that one of the projects created by Mayer, iGoogle, will be shut down. Other products in her portfolio, including Google Earth, are far from the top of the company's priority list. It goes on to say, meanwhile, Google's local effort was floundering before and after Mayer moved to the location and local department. Prior to her transfer, Google flubbed attempts to acquire fast-growing local services, including Yelp and Groupon. It says after her transfer, Google brought old media empire Zagat's. The acquisition, which Mayer personally announced in haiku tweet, was received with skepticism. It says so far the $100 to $200 million buy has had very little impact. It also says in this article that a lot of people found her to be kind of difficult, that she wasn't liked by a lot of people. Let's see, what does it say here? It says, where does it say here? Well, I don't know. It says here that, that she, well, it says here, this is the interesting part. It says, if Mayer was such a star, what made her leave? In other words, why is she leaving Google if she's such a star? Mayer was hired as employee number 20 at Google immediately after graduating from Stanford with a bachelor's and master's degree in computer science in 1999. It says from the beginning she was a polarizing figure. Douglas Edwards, Google's employee number 59, portrayed her as brilliant but difficult to work with in his book about the early days of Google. Doug Bowman, Google's visual design leader for 3 years and something of a celebrity within the design community, passive-aggressively blamed Mayer for Google's emphasis on data over good design when he resigned in 2009. One source told The Verge that Mayer was universally hated by the staff. Another said Mayer was frequently trailed by a gaggle of fanboys when walking around Google's Mountain View offices. So it sounds like, I don't know, it sounds like she has sort of a cult of personality, but it also sounds like that she might not be good at making well-designed products that consumers want. I mean, if you think about it, Google's real success is just the search engine. I mean, that's really where all the money comes that powers Google's, revenue. It's because it's a search engine and it can place ads in the search results. I mean, Gmail's a decent, product, but, I don't think that's making the big bucks. It's the ads. And YouTube was an acquisition. So what has Marissa Mayer really delivered? I mean, I think it's very possible that she's not going to do any better with Yahoo than the people before her. I mean, she really needs to, how can Yahoo become, what does Yahoo really have? I mean, Yahoo's not really a search engine anymore. So, and it doesn't have really any great products. I mean, it's got Yahoo Finance. It's just got like websites, but a lot of websites are free these days. And a lot of what Yahoo has can be easily replaced on the web. So how does Yahoo plan to make money? Because so much is free on the internet. So Yahoo's almost sort of like what happened to AOL. I mean, Yahoo in a way destroyed AOL because AOL was a closed system and you had to pay for a subscription to get into AOL. And then Yahoo and other web content providers provided stuff for free. So, I'm a little skeptical that Marissa Mayer can really do much to turn around the sinking ship that is Yahoo. So the word is that Apple's going to release Mountain Lion next week, the 25th of July. I guess that's a Wednesday. And MacRumors.com has a story on Sunday, July 15th that says Apple to launch OS X Mountain Lion on July 25th, ? It's what's I guess this comes from 9to5 Mac, which speculates that Apple may be launching the new version on July 25th. The reasoning comes from reports that Apple's retail stores will be performing overnight updates to stores on July 24th. So those updates could include the posting of marketing information and OS installations of Mountain Lion. Now, the Gold Master beta for developers of Mountain Lion has already been released, and it looks like it's running well. There haven't been many reports online of any complaints regarding the quality of the Gold Master. So, look, I think personally Mountain Lion is going to be well received. There's a number. The big things are the following. You're going to have voice dictation wherever you have internet connection built into the keyboard function. So wherever you can type something, you can use voice dictation. My understanding is it works pretty well if you have a decent internet connection. A lot of iOS things like the notifications are going to be in there. The email is going to have all sorts of cool things like VIPs. So if you can designate certain people as VIPs and then sort by VIPs. What else? You're going to have a reminders app, just like on the iPhone and the iPad, as a separate standalone app. And then iCloud, of course, is going to be built into it. And so, for example, already the text edit app, if you open, it gives you an interface where you can look on what's on your Mac or what's in your iCloud. And so if you have multiple Macs, your text edit documents will sync across them. And I guess they're going to be doing that with Pages and Keynote and all sorts of apps, and then third-party developers are going to be able to do that too. So there's a lot of cool things that are going to be in Mountain Lion, and I think it's going to be well received. Now, one thing that's going to be more significant with Mountain Lion and also iOS 6 is iCloud. And, The Verge made a very good point within an article that came out on July 16th by Adi Robertson entitled, "What is an iCloud? Users confused about Apple's storage tool." And the article points out that BuzzFeed has collected tweets from people who are being urged to upgrade their storage space on a service they've never heard of. And there are tweets, for example, somebody wrote, "What is iCloud? Keep getting notifications about my settings on it, and I don't even know what it does." And somebody else writes, "What is an iCloud?" And the point of the Verge article is that Apple needs to do a better job of explaining what iCloud is. And I'll tell you, maybe super geeks who are into technology like me or you who are listening to this podcast know what iCloud is, but a lot of everyday people who use the iPhone or a Mac, they're going to be clueless about iCloud because they don't follow this stuff. And, ultimately all the little upgrades and all the technology that's out there from different services for different devices, people don't know what it is, and it's hard for them to abstract and conceptualize things like iCloud. And iCloud, in some sense, is going to be difficult for people to grasp because it's very different than the traditional way of thinking of files and interfaces. Now, a lot of people in the 90s and even recently have been winged on Windows computers and the Finder format. And the Finder format is you have folders, and you put documents in folders, and you look at documents in folders. But iCloud's a little different because basically, instead of having a separate folder, all your documents are in the app, and then they're synced automatically if you choose to with iCloud, so that they are then available in the same app that you have on another Mac or on the iPhone or iPad. So this is where it's, a lot of people don't understand that. And of course, iCloud is also going to have traditional web-like services where you can, like MobileMe, go to a website and log in and, see your email or see a calendar or see some documents or see some videos or folders. But there's a level of abstraction here that people need to get used to, which is with iCloud, you're just going to have, let's say, your Pages documents, and they're just going to be in sync with Pages on the iPad. And the way it works is the folder where you're going to look for your documents is not going to be a folder in the operating system where it's going to be rather when you go to open in your, let's say, text edit document, you're going to see a column that says iCloud, and you're going to see documents listed in your iCloud account or documents existing that are just on your Mac in your app on the Mac. So, I think Apple really should start running ads explaining what iCloud is in a way that's not an abstraction, but in a way that people truly understand. Otherwise, I agree with The Verge. There's going to be a lot of confusion from people as to what these services are and how do you use them. Now, one of the controversies that has been brewing, and I discussed last week, is that Apple took itself out of the EPEAT standard, which is for recyclability and green products. And EPEAT, I guess, was an organization that was created, I guess, with the support of the federal government to certify computers and other electronic devices that could be recycled so that they don't pollute the environment. And Apple just sort of unexpectedly pulled out of it, and that caused a lot of people to complain. And then Bob Mansfield, who's in charge, I guess, of the Mac hardware and is retiring, he then reversed course and said that Apple made a mistake, which is interesting. I don't know if in Steve Jobs' time they would say that. And the devices are back under EPEAT standard and listed. Now, certain devices like the iPhone had not been, because one of the, I guess, standards of EPEAT is that you can take apart the device and recycle them. But what's interesting is that how did the new MacBook Pro, which got back into EPEAT, how did it get a gold level green rating? And Philip Elmer-DeWitt at Fortune has an interesting article in the Apple 2.0 section of Money, CNN Money. It says, but having extricated itself from one environmental cowpie, the company may have stepped into another. And it says, on Friday, as promised in the letter, the company put, quote, all eligible Apple products, quote, back on the Green Electronics Council's registry, giving them the gold label that indicates they are okay for purchase by the schools and governments. It says, but Apple went one step further. It gave gold labels to all 4 models of its new MacBook Pro with Retina display, devices whose batteries are famously affixed to their aluminum frames with industrial-strength glue so powerful that the disassembly experts at iFixit couldn't remove them without leaking hazardous goo all over. So some people are now saying, that how could Apple say that they qualify for EPEAT at any level? So who is it now? Somebody, Barbara Kyle, the ETCBC's national coordinator, explains how the MacBook Pros got a gold label rating, and she explains, quote, it's important to understand that the manufacturers grade themselves against the EPEAT criteria first, and then EPEAT conducts a review of this grading. That EPEAT review has not yet occurred. They can require the manufacturers to remove any products from the registry if it is not found to conform to the IEEE standard. And goes on to say, she adds, Apple is often design leader in electronics, but they really blew it here. So it may be that Apple gave the gold standard to the MacBook Retina and, it doesn't meet it. But listen, I'll have this to say. If Apple takes back any recyclable MacBook Pros, Retinas, and does the recycling themselves, I don't understand what the big deal is. The big deal is, you want to have devices that can be recycled. And if Apple takes full responsibility for recycling all Apple products like it does so far, it shouldn't really be an issue, because you should be able to, there are so many Apple stores, so many places. If Apple says all you have to do is just bring it to an Apple store and we'll recycle it, that should be the end of the discussion, So I think Apple's not getting fairly treated here by a lot of the media. Now, last week there was a major court decision in New York which helped a company that is, I guess, affiliated or controlled by Barry Diller, who, made a name by building up the Fox network and was a big TV executive. And it involves a little startup company called Aereo, E-A-E-R-E-O. And I've been using Aereo, and it's a website where it's in beta stage, and I had an invitation, and basically you can get over-the-air television that's broadcast in your neighborhood. But if you don't have a good antenna, you can get it to come through this website, and you can then watch it on your iPad or iPhone or I guess some other tablets. And eventually you're going to pay, I guess, something like $15 a month, and you get like whatever stations are broadcast over the air from TV stations you get through this website. And you can also use it like a DVR and a channel guide, and it works really well. I was very surprised. It's like a web app, and it seems to work really well on the iPad and iPhone. And essentially all the major, content producers and television entities sued Aereo in federal court to try to enjoin it from even offering this stuff. And they were denied a preliminary injunction or a temporary injunction. And actually the fee is going to be $12 a month. And it's been available in March. Now, the same Philip Elmer-DeWitt, who I've been talking about, he had a provocative article on July 12th entitled, "Apple is Winner for Now in the Aereo Online TV Ruling." Now, Apple has nothing to do with that litigation, but he makes a very interesting observation that the victory by Aereo is only temporary, but it threatens to undermine the delicate contractual structure of American television in a way that could give Apple a boost. He says, for starters, the victory, the litigation, allows Apple customers in New York City to get local TV content on their iOS devices, bringing them one step closer to being able to cut the cord. So I agree with that. I mean, I want to cut the cord. I'm sick of my cable in New York. And having over-the-air TV on Aereo gets me there closer. He goes on to say, but in the long run, assuming a jury finds in Aereo's favor, it could reboot the negotiations with content providers that Steve Jobs started, but was unable to complete before his death. And it says here, Jobs' dream for Apple TV was to provide for a monthly fee the best television without the rest of the 500 channels. So what Philip Elmer-DeWitt is saying is that content providers seeing this loss to Aereo, they may start now negotiating with Apple, and because Aereo's not paying these providers, Aereo isn't, and so maybe they'll just make negotiations with Apple where you'll be able to pick a lot of channels for a relatively low price and get them on your iPhone or iPad. It says here, if Aereo and companies like it are able to sell the content without paying for it, all bets are off. In a business environment where there are no retransmission fees to be collected, a deal with Apple, which unlike Aereo is willing to share revenue, might suddenly look more attractive. So he makes a very good point, because, if Aereo is allowed to retransmit over the air TV collect a fee and not give it to the content producers, then maybe the content producers will look to someone like Apple to, provide that stuff for a fee. So, the one downside with Aero is it's just over-the-air TV. You don't get like things like HBO or cable channels that are not broadcast over the air through Aero. So that's one drawback. On the other hand, if you have Aero with over-the-air TV, and then you have Netflix, which only costs like $8 a month, and then you every now and then buy, you get some free content for these other apps on the iPad, you might be able to significantly cut your TV bill from, $100 or $120 or $130 a month down to $30 or $40 a month. So, it's an interesting evolution, and I think Philip Elmer-DeWitt makes good points. Now, one function of the iPhone 4S that I really like is the Siri function, which is still in beta that Apple has. But the New York Times' Nick Bilton has taken a really mean sort of jab at it. In the Bits column on July 15th, Nick Bilton of the New York Times writes, "With Apple's Siri, a romance is gone." And basically he's saying that the Siri function, which is like the sort of talking, robotic, questioning artificial intelligence function of the iPhone 4S, he basically says it's not working very well, and that the Google version of this is much better. And he gives some example, where Siri didn't give good answers. So look, Siri's not perfect, but I do think, I greatly enjoy it, and I think a lot of the times it's right for me. Sometimes, it doesn't get some stuff, but in iOS 6, Siri is definitely souped up. So I don't know if he's using iOS 6, which is still in beta, but in iOS 6, there are specific functions that are added in there that make it much better. For example, if you want the scores of a sports team or the results of a standings in a sport, or if you're looking for movies or restaurant reviews. And I guess, the directions are better too. So he's basically saying that it's not working well, and he cites an analysis that Munster did over at Piper Jaffray, where he subjected to Siri over 1,600 voice tests, and on a half-busy street in Minneapolis and in a quiet room. And he basically says, in a quiet room, Siri understood requests 89% of the time, and and was only able to answer the question 68% of the time. So I don't know. Look, it's not perfect, but I do think it's something that is only going to get better, and it's not enough for me to switch to an Android phone, because the Android Siri version might be a little better. So I think this is only going to improve. I think with iOS 6 it's already improved, and so I think, Nick Bilton's looking for headlines there. Now I want to talk about a couple of apps that one got upgraded, another one that just came out that are very intriguing. Now, a while ago, several months ago, I mentioned a 99-cent app that was really compelling from Propellerhead, and Propellerhead for a long time has made great software for the Mac for people who want to make music. And Propellerhead's app is kind of simple. When it came out, several months ago, it allowed you to create all sorts of electronic loops, and it gave you drum, bass, and lead, and and you could just set the pattern of rhythm of the the type of instrument among the electronic keyboard and the bass, and you could make really cool, compelling loops, and it worked on the iPhone and on the iPad, and people really loved it. And you could make, I think they were 8-beat loops or something like that. But there was a major problem with it, in that you couldn't really save and export your loops. You could only play one, save one, and then start it. And if you want to start another one, you lost it. And it was such an easy to use program that, people are saying this is such a great interface. It'd be a great way if you could just create longer, more complex music. Well, they've upgraded it on July 6th. I didn't see the upgrade, which came about a week and a half ago, but it's great because the upgrade added several key features. You can now save, browse, and load your song files, so you can create and name different songs. Also, you can set the length of the loop pattern that you're creating to 1, 2, 4, 8 bars. And then here's the other key feature. You can export your audio via iTunes file sharing. Now, some people had hoped that you could email it, but this is a good start. And then it says there's better recording. You can tap record and then draw on the pad to start your recording, or just press play. So there's a new trigger. But the key thing here is they're making it more complex. They're making it so you can have multiple different bars that you can save your files and songs and have multiple saves of different songs on your iPhone or iPad, and more that you can export it. Because once you can export it, you could compose on the fly with this thing and then export your clips to, let's say, GarageBand, and then put together and create some sort of electronic song. So this is very powerful, and I bet you they're going to upgrade it some more. And I got to tell you, at 99 cents, I think this is an incredibly good deal. I think it's, it's very well designed, and it's one of the best musical apps that I've seen. So you can do all sorts of things with it, so check it out. Now, another app that just came out today on July 17th that I just purchased and is only 99 cents that you should probably check out is Checkmark. And Checkmark's by a guy named Snowman. But it's very cool. It's basically a reminders app. Now, with iOS 5 and with iOS 6, Apple has its own reminders app. But this thing is more powerful, and it's more powerful in a particular way in that it has much better geolocation than the current Reminders app. Now, one of the most powerful things in the current Reminders app that Apple has is geolocation, but it's kind of hard. You have to go through various steps to implement it. But if you look at the iTunes Store screenshots, what they've done here with the Reminders, this Checkmark app, is you can save your locations and give it an icon and a name. So if there's locations that you use a lot, you can save them. And so then if you want to pick a reminder for a location like home, you just click home and then create a reminder for that. When you don't have that sort of flexibility with reminders in that Apple has. And you can also just by date create reminders. But also your locations you can pick from your contact list, from a map, from your current position. The other thing that you can do is Apple, gives you the ability to remind you when you leave or arrive at a location. And this app can put a timer and say, no, remind me after 10 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour or whatever after I arrive or leave a location. And then the other thing that's kind of powerful is that you can set the size of the geofence of the location where you want to be reminded, which is very cool. Now, right now, it's not integrated with the Reminders app or with Siri. But remember, the Reminders app is going to have an API. So it could be that when iOS 6 is released, this app is upgraded and it will work with reminders. I mean, it could happen. So right now, its introductory sale price is only 99 cents. I think it's kind of cool, and I'm going to try. I bought it, and I'm going to use it for a while to see if I can use it more. One of the things I like about the Reminders app is that it works with Siri. You can say, Siri, remind me to do this. But it'd be nice at some point if Siri is integrated with this checkmark app. But it has a lot of value. I think having the ability to set the amount of the geofence around the location where you want to be reminded is great. And having save locations as icons that you can readily access and then create reminders for, I think is very powerful. You could have a work icon, you can have a home icon, you can have a relatives icon, a friends icon. The possibilities are endless. And maybe this is the kind of thing that Apple will look at and then incorporate in the Reminders app. Okay, so that's it for episode 122 of the Apple Podcast. Thanks for listening. This is Lex at Mac's Future. Remember, this is a chit-chat-free podcast all about Apple-related stuff, and you can support it by giving it a positive review in the App Store or the iTunes Store, and that will help other people find it. So thanks for listening.
This has been a Mac's Future production.